efficient algorithm for determining values not as frequent in a list. I am building a quiz application which pulls questions randomly from a pool of questions. However, there is a requirement that the pool of questions be limited to questions that the user has not already seen. If, however, the user has seen all the questions, then the algorithm should reset and only show questions the user has seen once. That is, always show the user questions that they have never seen, or, if they have seen all of them, always show them questions they have seen less frequently before showing questions they have seen more frequently. The list L is created in such a way that the following is true: any value in the list I may exist once, or be repeated in the list multiple times. Let's define another value in the list J, such that it's not the same value as I. Then 0 is lower than or equal to abs, frequency I, frequency J, is lower than or equal to 1 will always be true. To put it another way, if a value is repeated in the list 5 times, and 5 times is the maximum number of times any value has been repeated in the list, then all values in the list will be repeated either 4 or 5 times. The algorithm should return all values in the list with frequency equals 4 before it returns any with frequency equals 5. Sorry this is so verbose, I'm struggling to define this problem succinctly. Please feel free to leave comments with questions, and I will further qualify if needed. Thanks in advance for any help you can provide. Clarification. Thank you for the proposed answers so far. I don't think any of them are there yet. Let me further explain. I'm not interacting with the user and asking them questions. I'm assigning the question IDs to an exam record so that when the user begins an exam, the list of questions they have access to is determined. Therefore, I have 2 data structures to work with. List of possible question IDs that the user has access to. List of all question IDs this user has ever been assigned previously. This is the list L described above. So, unless I am mistaken, the algorithm solution to this problem will need to involve list and or set-based operations using the 2 lists described above. The result will be a list of question IDs I can associate with the exam record and then insert into the database.
Why not have 2 lists, one for questions not yet picked and one for questions that have been picked? Initially, the not yet picked list will be full, and you will pick elements from it which will be removed and added to the picked list. Once the not yet picked list is empty, repeat the same process as above, this time using the full picked list as the not yet picked list and vice versa.
Let's define a pivot that separates a list into 2 sections. The pivot partitions the array such that all numbers before the pivot has been picked one more than the numbers after the pivot, or more generally, all numbers before pivot are ineligible for picking, while all numbers after the pivot are eligible for picking. You simply need to pick a random item from the list of numbers after the pivot, swap it with the number on the pivot, and then increment the pivot. When the pivot reaches the end of the list, you can reset it back to the start. Alternatively, you can also use 2 lists, which is much easier to implement, but is slightly less efficient as it needs to expand/shrink the list. Most of the time, the ease of implementation would trump the inefficiency, so the 2 list would usually be my first choice.
Rewritten with the database stuff and fill in pseudocode. If I understand the problem correctly, I'd treat the questions or their IDs as proxies, like a physical deck of cards. For each user, shuffle the deck and deal them a question at a time. If they want more than len deck questions, just start over, shuffle the deck into a new order and do it again. When a question is seen for the nth time, all other questions will have been seen n or n1 times. To keep track of what questions the user has had available, we put the unused question IDs back in the database and increment the how many times through a counter whenever we need a new deal. Something like
To implement your algorithm, you only need to shuffle the list and pass through it, and when done, repeat. No need to copy the list or juggle items between 2 lists, just use the following control flow, for example.
Press your time.